So, ladies and gentlemen, today we must talk about the dreaded smoke detector or smoke alarm beep. Now, the one late great Kevin Samuels connected the smoke alarm chirp with single women because they did not have a man or a masculine presence in the household to go up there and change the battery in the smoke detector because they are annoyed with the constant chirp, as most of us know hardworking or determined men would, because again, it's a constant annoyance.
First of all, you're definitely a single woman because
Yes.
you got the single woman tell, that damn smoke detector.
Mm-hmm.
How do you live with that?
The way that I've been living with just being a single woman is
No,
like,
no, 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 no. Specifically, the smoke detector that keeps chirping. How do
oh,
you live with that?
can you just elaborate more on like what do you mean by the smoke
It
detector?
it it keeps going beep.
Like red
You,
flags? Are you
that smoke detector that's beeping in the background. There's a
oh.
smoke detector.
Um,
It beeps every 30 seconds and it goes beep.
I don't hear anything beeping. Did you just hear it again? Because I don't hear anything.
Wait for it. Told you guys they don't hear it after a while. There it was.
But this brother right here that you see on the screen is associating the smoke alarm beep with low income areas. Now, you could say that, the smoke alarm is going off because the racism that you're experiencing in your community, in your life.
Racism.
Oh, you said it right there.
Or that I don't have enough money to change a 9-volt battery because I don't have the money to go to the store to buy a battery, right?
I'm broke, nigga. I'm broke.
But in my opinion, in this society, people that are broke, they don't have money to change the smoke detector battery, but they have enough money to buy an iPhone. They have enough money to buy weave and extensions. They have enough money to buy Jordans and, nice jackets. And they have enough money to buy rims for their vehicle. They have the money to go buy Hennessy and nails and Fashion Nova and Temu and all these kind of things, but they can't change the battery in the smoke alarm. So we're going to listen to this brother psychologize the smoke detector beep, all right? If you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and all of you, please hit the like button. And to further donate to the channel, you can join the channel membership down below by hitting the join button. I have members only videos. And also, please hit the Cash App, $sign Mr. Normie. Let's listen to this young brother's detailed explanation.
Have you ever thought about how we came to associate the beep of a dying fire alarm with being broke? My name is Drew. I'm a sociologist, and sociology is the study of society and human behavior in social context, which is obviously an extraordinarily broad area of inquiry and by extension a very broad discipline. And so a lot of sociologists choose to concentrate their focuses on really specific topics. One of my 5 major focuses is the biopsychosocial axis, or somatics, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The bio is how we experience our bodies and what goes on in there, what's going on with our heart and our nervous systems. The psycho is how we experience our minds and also how the brain interacts with our bodies. So that's how things fire, where neurotransmitters come in. And the social is how our lived experiences are, at least in part, the responsibility of someone else and vice versa. And today I want to talk about the prefrontal cortex. Now, in order to identify...
Okay, so already he is a sociologist and he, I guess, studies in social economics and things of that nature. And he's already talking about the impoverished community and the prefrontal cortex. Here we go.
Ain't no fucking way.
So we're already going to somehow put a handicap to the fact that people can't just get a 9-volt battery. Okay, I get it. It's money spent, but a 9-volt battery versus everything else I detailed in the beginning of this video is not that expensive, right? A lot of these people he's talking about, they're on government assistance. They have maybe some kind of side hustle. Maybe they're doing something that's under the table. They have money. They can carve out maybe $2 or $3 somewhere to change that battery. Or if they're in a rental property, like he said, well, he will say eventually you can get somebody to change that. Somebody is in charge of your rental property. They can change that, right? Okay.
the relationship between beeping fire alarms, being broke, and the prefrontal cortex, we need to understand what the prefrontal cortex is. And I think the easiest way to
By the way, judging by all the rings he has in his ear and his mannerisms, this is the perfect profession for him.
describe it is the part of the brain that evolved to make all of the stimuli that you're receiving as you go through life into something cohesive. It shows you which stimuli to respond to, which stimuli to ignore. It's how sometimes people can multitask or split their attention between multiple things. But the prefrontal cortex also has a role in governing executive function. And executive function is many things, but I mostly identify it as the ability to identify, initiate, follow through on, and complete a task, as well as behave in ways that are socially reconcilable and handle your emotions. So using the dying fire alarm as the example, you hear the beep, you register what that means. It means that the batteries are dying. You get a stool, you put the stool against the wall, you climb up on the stool, you twist the fire alarm, and you take it down from off the wall. You inspect it, you see what kind of batteries it needs. You go to your drawer to see if you have those batteries. If you don't have those batteries, you make a point to go to the store that day. You go and get the batteries, you come in, you swap them out, you climb back up on the stool, you put it on the wall, you twist it in, and there you've done it, you've replaced your fire alarm.
Yes, or
perhaps you live in an apartment and you don't have the money to buy the batteries, so you contact your landlord and you tell them, hey, I need you to switch out the batteries on my fire alarm. Either way.
there we go. Like I said, either way, the battery gets changed, right? Either you go buy it yourself and install it yourself, or you contact whoever the person is that's in charge of your property and say, hey, the smoke alarm needs changing, because that is probably the responsibility of the property owner, because that's something that comes with the property. Either way, it's got to get changed, right? To not only protect the property owner from their property they're paid for, that you're paying rent for, getting burned down. Okay, it also protects you in the event that you're asleep or you're busy. You don't notice your house being ablaze or your residence being ablaze, your apartment, what have you, and then the alarm lets you know that something is terribly wrong and you need to make your escape quickly, right? Okay.
You've identified a task, you've initiated the task, you followed through on the task, and you have completed the task. That is what's supposed to happen when your prefrontal cortex is functioning exactly as it is supposed to, completely unaccosted, and everything's fine. Okay, so now that we have an understanding of how a functional prefrontal cortex is supposed to operate, we can start to explore this idea of what a dysfunctional or dysregulated prefrontal cortex is supposed to look like. And one of the most common circumstances in which we can identify a dysregulated prefrontal cortex, and by extension an inhibited capacity for executive functioning, is in people with an ADHD diagnosis. ADHD is characterized by a lot of things, but chief among them, because you have a dysregulated prefrontal cortex, it is the inability to properly manage your emotions, to respond to stimuli tactfully, and also the ability to identify, initiate, follow through on, and complete tasks. This is why kids who have ADHD before they're diagnosed are often identified as being disobedient or never turning in homework. This is also why adults with ADHD can have a hard time being on time to things. Because even if you understand the stimuli of the consequences, what you need to do, when you need to do it, and when you need to be there, if the prefrontal cortex is not firing the way it's supposed to, it's just not firing. And no.
So now something's wrong with your prefrontal cortex, aka ADHD or some other type of neurological condition. And he's going to get further in detail about that, of how you might miss or overlook purposely the smoke detector chirp.
Kind of yelling or frustration or cutting people off is going to change that. And that's why we have to give these diagnoses, so that we can understand them as these specialized circumstances that they are. But ADHD isn't the only thing that dysregulates the prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
There are a lot of biopsychosocial phenomena that correspond with the dysregulation of the prefrontal cortex or other parts of the brain.
By the way, he is using a lot of words I do not fucking understand to explain this. So if you know what any of these words mean, bio, dysphoria, whatever the hell, feel free to put them down in the comment section. Explain to a uneducated normie like me how he's trying to put all this stuff together for the end diagnosis. All right.
Like anxiety and depression, but also acute and chronic stress and trauma. And those are the ones that I kind of want to focus on, especially because the definitions of stress and trauma and what constitutes something that is stressful or traumatic isn't really up to you or somebody else. So this idea that someone can say, well, you shouldn't really be experiencing stress, or you don't really have an excuse because what happened to you wasn't that bad. So what, your parents yelled at you, or so what, your parents got a divorce. I know people have been through worse. I've been through worse. They don't really determine what constitutes something that is acute.
Okay, yeah, he's right. I don't get to tell somebody something that they went through is traumatic. However, there are things that are comparable, right? I can say that, my parents getting divorced when I was, whatever age is not the same as, maybe watching somebody bleed out from a shotgun, something like that. You know what I mean? Like there's can some things be traumatic? Yes, but in my opinion, again, this is just my Neanderthal thinking. There are levels to quote unquote trauma. Okay, so there are things that you might could, work around, or maybe with some kind of therapy you can deal with, and there are other things that are a lot more long lasting. Okay, and can really affect you in negative ways if you're not able to handle it properly or have a healthy way of coping with it. You understand what I mean? And yeah.
Traumatic or stressful. What does is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and the sympathoadrenal medullary axis, which are structures within the brain that govern our stress responses. And I don't want to talk too much about the mechanics of those things, but what you need to know is that when they identify something that constitutes stress, that they decide constitutes stress, they release stress hormones. They release cortisol, they release adrenaline, norepinephrine, noradrenaline. And in circumstances where there are continual stressors that they can identify, they are releasing that on a loop. They're releasing it too frequently, and this overwhelms the brain and dysregulates its traditional functions because it's a very delicately balanced system.
Okay.
Now, there are countless studies, many of which I draw on for my own research, that link the lived experience of low income or impoverished socioeconomic status with deviations in longitudinal adolescent neurological development.
Here we go. See, he's talking about impoverished communities, less fortunate, things like that. And again, because this young brother here seems to be African American. I don't know if he's not FBA, okay, but he's a black brother, okay. And so most people are going to associate his explanation with the black community being less impoverished or less fortunate. However, this can be This can be pasted to any community that's impoverished or that has these type of devices in their household. It could be the white community, the brown community, if you will, any community. Okay, so let's not say this is just for the black community, but people in his comment section of this video are probably going to assume he's talking about the black community because, well, he's black.
It's just adolescent neurological development over time and well into adulthood. And I just want to make this clear, I'm focusing on what's going on with the brain and specifically the prefrontal cortex, but this is not limited exclusively to the prefrontal cortex. This affects the entire brain. This also affects the entire body. And there are many circumstances in which we can identify those, but we're focusing specifically on the fire alarm. And I think by now you can see where I'm going with this. In fact, I think we've basically arrived at the part of the video where my point is made. So as we near the end, I really just want to read a little bit out of this book, The Deepest Well by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. She is, in my view, one of the preeminent scholars, researchers, and authorities on this specific kind of interaction, the biopsychosocial element of this, the chronic stress and how that impacts development over time, especially in youth. This is the kind of book that should be read in conjunction with things like The Body Keeps the Score or The Chemistry of Joy. And she started to sort of begin her investigation of this when she was getting what she felt like was too many ADHD referrals to her clinic, because people were able to recognize the dysregulation of the prefrontal cortex, among other things, but she was able to recognize that perhaps it wasn't ADHD, it was something else. And that's when she started to identify the relationship between acute and chronic trauma and stress and her kids' neurological development. And so she says here, the doctor
again, before he lands the plane, because it's gonna be like another 2 minutes before he does this. In my opinion, okay, just for early spoiler alert here, this has nothing to do with how much money you make or anything like that. It's pure, in my opinion, lack of self-awareness or just plain on laziness. Just like the Kevin Samuels clip you saw, this woman has neglected to change the smoke alarm for whatever reason, and she's neglected for so long that she's actually gotten used to it, so much so that she doesn't even recognize it's going off anymore. It's just part of the normal sounds of the house now. Kevin Samuels like, well, do you hear it go off? And she's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? It's been going off in the background the whole time they've been talking, and she doesn't even recognize it anymore. They're talking, she's having a full conversation without it clicking in her head that the smoke alarm is going off. And I'm pretty sure when it first started going off, probably 2-3 months ago, she noticed it. But she just went about her day. She never called one of her, guys out the friend zone. She never called her taller homegirl, or she never called the maintenance man or anybody to come fix it or whatever. She never, nothing. She never bought a ladder. She just let it keep going. And now she's talking to, the stylist guy, aka Kevin Samuels, I forgot what he called himself. But anyway, she's talking to Kevin Samuels, and he notices it because he's a productive man, productive individual in general. And he's like, well, you don't hear that? It's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Diagnostic criteria for ADHD told me I had to rule out other explanations for ADHD symptoms, such as pervasive developmental disorders, schizophrenia, or other psychotic disorders before I could diagnose ADHD. But what if there was a more nuanced answer? What if the cause of these symptoms, the poor impulse control, inability to focus, difficulty sitting still, was not a mental disorder exactly, but a biological process that worked on the brain to disrupt normal functioning? Now, she talks about that because she kept getting ADHD referrals, but she was noticing that they were concurrent with other things that were acutely traumatic that she was able to identify. The other section that I want to read is just her version of the breakdown as to what happens when chronic stress is introduced to the prefrontal cortex. For kids with toxic stress, the activity of the prefrontal cortex is inhibited in two ways. First, the overactive amygdala sends messages to the PFC telling it to decrease its functioning because something stressful is happening. You don't want reason getting in the way of survival. The second is that the locus coeruleus is flooding the brain with noradrenaline, compromising the ability to override instincts and impulses. The PFC is the part of the kid's brain that puts the brakes on impulses and helps him or her make smarter decisions. Telling a kid to sit still, concentrate, and ignore stimuli that are flooding his brain with the need to act is a lot to ask. And the downregulation of the PFC can have different consequences for different people. For some, it results in an inability to concentrate and solve problems, but in others, it manifests as impulsive behavior and aggression. Wrapping it up nicely together in the dying fire alarm, if we can start to understand that the lived experience of low income or impoverished socioeconomic statuses can dysregulate the prefrontal cortex such that the simple task of replacing the fire alarm is made difficult, then we can also start to recognize that living with fire alarms that beep and beep and beep until they die is going to be a more common occurrence in places where people of those socioeconomic statuses are concentrated. And from there, it's as simple as subconsciously connecting the two in our brains without ever realizing it, although often alluding to it. And my name is Drew.
Okay, if you're still here at this part of the video, thank you very much. I know it's a long explanation, so I apologize, all right? But I had to get to the end. I had to let you get all the way through it because, again, his explanation is long and very scientific and philosophical, well, not philosophical, but, very detailed when it comes to psychology and sociology, all right? So, again, he's connecting low-income areas and some type of stress and trauma of being broke with not recognizing or just simply not changing the fire alarm, just getting used to the chirp. I don't think it's that serious, okay? Because if you can afford to live in a place, and yes, you might be that broke, but I mean, come on, letting the smoke alarm go off for a month or two at a time, with the amount of opportunity that people have, and people that they say they're broke and they're not really broke, they're saying they're broke because they can't get what they want, but they can afford what they need. I mean, there's levels to it. I believe there's nuance and gray areas to this, but this guy right here, of course, is explaining this in a way where we can get sympathy for people and just letting them let the smoke alarm chirp as long as they want. If you ask me, it has nothing to do with financial status. It has everything to do with, fortitude and, laziness. But that's my take. And with that being said, thank you for attending another episode of the Working Man Podcast. I am your host, Nicholas J. Fury. If you're at home, you have a smoke alarm that is chirping right now. I hope you didn't get offended by what I said, but if you haven't changed it by now, I probably feel the same way about you. Anyway, let me know what you think about it down in the comment section. And please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the notification bell. Be out of the door, and I will see you on the next video.